So I shared a breakfast meal this week with someone.
Initials are. It's happened to be HH.
And the purpose of the meeting was that so I could meet somebody new, the new director of the Rothko Center. And this person who had arranged this meeting introduced me by saying, Bill usually mentions 48 books every time he teaches. I have really done better about that. I have done better about that. Maybe
I think my point was I can't possibly keep up.
However, let's begin with that. Because this is a book which if you have not read, get it and read it. It's 22 chapters. You can read each one in less than 10 minutes. By the way, for those of you who are not aware, the text that we speak from, the video and the audio version of this time goes out every Tuesday morning. And that includes all the slides. So,
And the books. Yeah.
And the books will be on the slide. And in the text, and in the audio, and in the video. Well, I don't do that anymore. I'll have to take that up with somebody who does. So this is a book that we use in spiritual direction a lot, at least I do, because when you read a book like this, you can make notes on it. You can have questions that come up that we can talk about. You know, when COVID came to an end and we reconvened, I said that one of the hopes I had for Ordinary Life would be that people would randomly stand up or come forward and say they wanted to start a discussion group or a dinner club or something, a mission group. You could get a group going about this book. It's a really good book. And Jim Hollis, who used to live here and was the director of the Jung Center, wrote this book. He's done some good things. Anyway, in this book, and I never depart from the script.
Never, because you haven't even in this brief introduction. Lord have mercy.
In this book, Jim Hollis says that every day we rise to find two gremlins at the foot of our bed. One of them is named fear, and the other is named lethargy. And fear says the world's too big for you. You're not up to it. Find a way to slide away again today. Tomorrow's another day. Or lethargy says, hey, take it easy. You got it coming. You've been working too hard. Take a drink. Have some chocolate. Now, we may or may not be conscious of these two conversations with fear and lethargy, but every day, each of us has to decide, how will I spend my life today? I try to substitute the word life for time. So when you say I just wasted time today, you can say I just wasted life today. How shall I spend my time today? My life. And this time today is about choosing and about choices, and it's about the authority we trust in making the choices, and it's about how and when we can open ourselves to the miracle of walking the wayless way. And now, this is not a casual issue. So one of the goals that I have as a trans-religious spiritual teacher, and I'm going to elaborate on that phrase today before we're done, is to raise to consciousness what criteria do we use when we make the choices that we do. So every one of us uses something. We have some set of criteria that we use. So what is the spirituality that is adequate for these times? I know that my own work is centered around how do I find some structure for my own life while living in a society that has clearly lost its bearings. So there is an incident found in the database of the sayings and deeds attributed to Jesus. And that's what we're going to talk about today. As we get to it, you will find that it is in the Gospel of Thomas, Mark, Matthew, and Luke. That's the order in which they were written. And it's been used differently by each of the people who assemble those documents. So it shows that the people who assemble those documents felt free to use the teachings and deeds of Jesus to serve their own purposes. Okay. Which seems to me to shoot in the foot any notions of literal interpretation of Scripture. So we're going to start by saying this has not been an easy text for us to deal with, but you're about to hear how we have chosen, about choices, to do this. So here's the material that we're up to. And for those of you who are keeping up with following this in the Gospel according to Stephen Mitchell, I've taken this from Robert Funk's version because I think it reflects a combination of all of those that's the earliest. So this is the text. And some in the crowds around Jesus would say, "He drives out demons in the name of Beelzebul, the head demon." Others were testing him by demanding a sign from heaven. But he knew what they were thinking and said to them, "Every government divided against itself is devastated. And a house divided falls. If Satan is divided against himself, how will his domain endure? If I drive out demons in Beelzebul's name, in whose name do your own people drive them out? In that case, they will be your judges."
Yeah, and as you mentioned, reading this passage this particular week felt hard because it's in part about authority. Who has it? In whom do we place ours? And what's our relationship to that authority? It shook me this week for deep reasons and not so deep reasons. Number one, even if you're not a soccer fan, you probably heard what I have come to call red card gate, where Trump puts his thumb into the World Cup where it absolutely wasn't necessary. It's an abuse of authority. And I fundamentally believe that pallor hung over what would otherwise be a pretty joyous event. Number two, on a national level, we are in a house divided. I have never before felt such a strong energy of us versus them. On a state level, our divisiveness is thrown into sharp relief as well. And the difference between who emulates the prophet and who emulates the strong man seems fairly clear. The second part of this passage illustrates Jesus' defensiveness about being accused of what they would call demonic sorcery, a healing. It's so antithetical, his defensiveness is so antithetical to other authentic sayings of Jesus that it's hard to take seriously. On the surface, it calls attention to this kind of Old Testament punishing God, you will be judged. One that Jesus scholars have said Jesus denies over and over and over. So I'm kind of drawn back to the first part about the healing, in which there's kind of a deep discomfort with the healing powers of external mystery and our internal willingness to be healed. It's important to note, though, that part of what Jesus does is call out the hecklers, if you will, for attributing healing of oppressed people to Satan. I think one of the choices we're faced with is whether we choose to participate in healing or approach it, as Bill alluded to, with fear and lethargy. In one of our conversations this week, Bill said this quote, "Prophets build bridges and disrupt borders." It's also true that prophets, especially in their own land, are often criticized, especially when they challenge the status quo. I think that challenging the status quo might touch deeply into our own self-doubt or awaken a latent intuition that something ain't right. Perhaps even more challenging, though, it touches some of our own inner light, our own ability to heal. If transformation happens, as Carl Jung would say, in holding that tension of opposites, then this is one to hold, the tension between infinite mystery and our deep interior knowing. If we embrace our interior knowing, we have to take responsibility for the impact of our choices on others. If we diminish our interior knowing, we get to sit back and blame others for what happens, which is so much more delicious. So surrendering to healing, our ability to heal and be healed, requires curiosity and openness. And I believe it is fundamentally a lack of those two that keeps us in a divided house. What I hope to contribute today is understanding of this passage through a liberatory lens, leading with the question of what is ours to do on behalf of justice, love, and freedom. And then from a psycho-spiritual lens, from that interior space, using Jung as a guide. A liberatory lens asks something of our bodies, where do we place ourselves? And a Jungian lens asks something of our hearts, how do we open them?
So I'm going to guess that most of you here have heard the word Beelzebub before, right? Now, Beelzebub is a word that was used about 1,400 years before Jesus about the conflict that the Jews were having with neighboring tribes about how they understood what they meant when they used the word God. There were in that time many gods. Many understanding of gods. Even in the time of Jesus, when Paul was making his way into the Roman Empire and encountered many of the Greek gods. In the time of the Jews, in their development history, those other gods were referred to as Baals, B-A-A-L-S. So you remember very clearly when Charlton Heston when Moses went up on the mountain to get the 10 Commandments, the people got impatient. And they thought that the God that Moses was connected to, who'd gotten them all in the mess in the first place, was a big mistake. So they made a golden calf and worshiped this golden calf as an idol. This painting is perhaps the most famous one of this incident. It's by Nicolas Poussin. And I put it up there because there is nothing in our culture where anybody in a leadership position is making anything out of gold. He said sarcastically.
Yeah, never.
So these gods were called Baals. And the head god had a name of Zebul, Z-E-B-U-L. So that was Bel Zebul. That's where that word comes from, Beelzebul. And what it means is, of all the gods, this is the exalted one. Beelzebul is the head of all the other gods. Now, the biblical writers, in an effort to show their contempt for this god, changed the word from Beelzebul to Beelzebub. And just the change of one letter made it change from the head of all the gods to Lord of the Flies. That's what Beelzebub means. The one who hangs around dung. I mean, they did not have a high opinion of this God. So the people of this culture believed in gods. And when a person was ill or afflicted in some way, as we alluded to last week, they said that they were possessed by the gods in some way. Evil spirits rule the world. Paul referred to these as the principalities and the powers. And the ruler of this realm was Beelzebul. So last week we talked about what an uproar Jesus caused when he casted out a demon. Now, in this text we're looking at today, the people do not question Jesus' power to do this. They simply say his power comes from the devil. So here's a summary of this text that we're dealing with. Jesus performs a mighty act. Those opposing him said that his miraculous gift was of the devil. So Jesus makes a three-pronged response to this. First, he says to cast out demons by the power of demons would be to imply a rift in the house of demons. And Satan would never allow this. And second, Jesus says, some of your own people perform miracles. Are they also inspired by the evil one? And third, he says, the miracles I do are clearly good, so how can they be called evil? Now, the Jesus scholars are not in any doubt about the authenticity of this encounter. But what makes it difficult to interpret is that each of those who use it for a different purpose. So what we're left with is what to do with a teaching like this. It's authentic and its use is confusing. So that's how I began today talking about choices, because that's what we had to do, to make a choice. And over and over and over in the Hebrew scripture, the people are called, choose you this day whom you will serve. Over and over. So by the time the early Jesus movement began to move into the larger Mediterranean world, there was this large assortment of gods that were worshipped. And we have them in our culture too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When thinking about choices, when I approach Scripture, there are three choices I make about how to read it. Through a liberatory lens, through an ecological lens, and through a feminist lens. Those are the choices I make when I'm trying to understand or grapple with sacred Scripture. I'm fundamentally different than fundamentalists in that way. And so the lens that I'm using today is through liberation theology. It's a Christian movement that emerged in South America in the 1960s. And it's designed to totally, restructure our understanding of Scripture through the eyes of the poor and the oppressed. It sees the teachings of Jesus as undermining economic and political structures that deny spiritual and social freedom. It is not just theoretical, but it requires direct action through grassroots organizing and challenges corrupt systems. Right belief, that's a Buddhist concept, is coupled with right action, also a Buddhist concept, such that theology does not get trapped inside of kind of the storied cloisters of academia or religious spaces like this one, but it's performed in public to alleviate suffering. As serious students of Jesus' teachings, I think we're called to apply them to challenge oppressive structures, both social and political. We have plenty of opportunity to do that right now. When religious elites claim that Jesus' healing abilities are demonic, two things occurred to me. One, why do we so readily call the prophet crazy? And two, notice how quickly Jesus undermines the oppressor's propaganda. That's the nature of the second part of the verse. Satan cannot drive out Satan. That's the house divided piece. He calls out the reliance on fear and conspiracy to protect power. Seen through a liberatory lens, his whole ministry is anti-establishment. I'm always moved by the fact that he took the synagogue out of the synagogue. He took the community onto the hill, out of the structure, into the public spaces. But this tension, of course, is by design. Those who abuse power demean everyone around them in order to strike fear about speaking out. Abusive power, not power itself, is the problem here. And it's abusive power that liberation theology works against. I'm reminded here of Martin Luther King's quote, "What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against it." It would truly be a healing miracle of enormous magnitude if we could embrace the kind of justice that corrects anything that stands against love. I don't remember who said this. Has John Dominic Crossan been in this room? I think it was him. It was maybe a decade or so ago. But I remember him saying, when he was trying to help us imagine what does it mean to actually love the way God loves, he said something like, call to mind the person you love most in the world. Now call to mind the person who has loved you best in the world. Try to summon the enormity of that love. Like, let it enter your being. And if each person, if all of us on the planet could do this together for one moment, then for one moment we would love as God loves. And we might fundamentally change the world. I recall, for example, for me, the instantaneous love I felt of the children I mothered into this world. That was the first moment. Now, 16 years later, we've had lots of moments. But that love was infallible, and it was pure. It was like nothing I had ever felt. It was miraculous. If we all felt that kind of love at the same moment, for just one moment, then that proverbial arc of history pushes forward.
So this text also raises this question. Did Jesus perform miracles? It's a fundamentalist test, right? One of the 6 fundamentals is the belief in the literal nature of miracles. Mm-hmm. So I'm asking you, did Jesus perform miracles? Mm-hmm. And the answer to that is yes.
Everyone was afraid to answer.
If, however, you mean by that, did Jesus violate or manipulate the laws of physics? The answer is no. Now that's hard for some people to hear because we want to make Jesus different from us, which at almost every step along the way, he did not want to happen. I call you friends, you are going to do what I do, blah, 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 all of that. So Jesus clearly had a reputation as a healer. Marcus Borg, who's also been in this room, and who I think is one of the most to be trusted scholars about Jesus, said that the very first stroke he would draw in painting a portrait of Jesus is that Jesus is a spirit-filled person. I think that may be the most crucial fact about the Jesus of history. The Spirit was an experiential fact in his life. And more, he mediated that experience to other people. That is, to those who were open to it. And the text clearly says some weren't, because it violated what they thought had to be the authority and source of miracles, which is what Holly is talking about. Now, there's a lesson here for us if we can hear it. And that lesson is that grace is always available to us if we're open to receive it. Now, if you step out of Western culture and into the study of other religions and other cultures, you will find that there are, to this moment, people who have and continue to have subjective experiences of another level of reality. That's one of the reasons that psychedelic drugs are being experimented with in the area of psychology to deal with depression and a variety of other things in our culture. Because some people believe that psychedelic drugs are a mediator of the sacred. That's not my position, but there are others who believe that. These people who experience the sacred, unless they're doing it for purely personal reasons, egocentric reasons, become mediators of the sacred. So there is another reality that is not off out there somewhere, but is right here around us. And the Jewish tradition is filled with stories about such people. And so are indigenous religions all over the globe. In Native American tradition, the Sioux Indian, the black elk, was said to have these kinds of experiences. I'm quoting now from Marcus Borg. During the time of Jesus, two of the best known are Honi, H-O-N-I, the circle drawer, and Hanina Mendoza, both of whom were famed for their contemplative prayer and their ability as miracle workers. And these people are documented in sources outside the New Testament. As you know, I love Jim Finley. And Jim Finley says that
Wait, you just actually mentioned a book without mentioning a book.
What book?
Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time.
That is a good book. If you haven't read it, it's a good book. Jim Finley says that here's what he believes about Jesus. People came to Jesus and they were excluded for one reason or another from the community. And Jesus saw them for who they were. He looked past what the society said defined these people to who they really were and communicated, if you see you like I see you, then you will experience the wholeness that I see in you. And people who had faith in that experienced healing. When I got to do some teaching at Baylor years and years ago, I taught residents who, before they would go out making rounds, before you leave a patient today, touch that patient, and while you're touching that patient, before you leave the room, say, be well. That's all. Some people resisted doing that, but I based that on a study that was done at a hospital at the University of Miami Medical Center, that's done years ago, where premature children, they all got excellent treatment. Nobody got neglected. But in this study, the infants were divided into two groups. And one group had people who, in addition to all the other care these infants got, put their hand either into the incubator or into the crib, and they stroked the baby 5 minutes at 4-hour intervals throughout the day. That's all. That was the only difference. And those babies' weight gain and general well-being and measurable things improved dramatically over the infants that did not get that. And the people who did the study said that these infants responded to tactile stimulation. And I said horse feathers. They responded to love. Because when you touch somebody that way, you're communicating something that children were not getting in any other way. I think one of the great tragedies that we call it growing up is that we lose the wonder of life. And if and when we raise our heads out of the water in which we swim, when we drop the habit of burden and routine, everything is a miracle. What we're doing right now is a miracle. It is a miracle that I can vibrate chords in my throat that activate sound waves that strike something in your ear and something in your brain translates it into meaning. That's miraculous. So the mystics don't see a leaf as a leaf, but as millions of years of evolution, as sunlight caught in green flesh. Perhaps this is one of the reasons that Jesus urged us to become his children. Everything is a miracle.
I'm sitting here wishing that I had put this photo in the slides of my oldest son when he was maybe 2 or 3 years old, and he's sitting literally like right smack in the middle of my garden, and he's putting flowers in his hair. And he's just like, his face is just the wonder of a 2 or 3-year-old. And I remember taking that picture thinking, I wish I could be like that. You know, sitting there putting, because as a mother, when we are able to be present with our children, we can experience things again through them. Like we're having first-time experiences with our kids, and that was one of those miracle moments.
If you did that today, people would say you're crazy.
I know. That's the problem.
Yeah. People who are more developed than us, we look at as saying they're crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people who are not as developed as us, we look down and say they're stupid.
Right. Yeah. Fundamental problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I love that notion of sunlight caught in flesh. And in fact, sunlight is caught in our flesh. You know, the first stardust from the Big Bang, or the first explosiveness from the Big Bang, is in our bones. That's such a beautiful notion to me. One of the greatest miracles, though, that you touched on is that we can love in spite of great pain. Or maybe even because of pain is why we love. The kind of love that the mystics speak about is called transpersonal love. This is beyond the affection I have for an individual. It's even beyond liking an individual. It's about believing that that individual deserves to be loved, and that everything we will do will promote more love between people. It's the commitment that everything belongs. It's foundational to spiritual union, but also to liberation. What Jesus teaches us through this passage is that we should stand against power that threatens transpersonal love. Again, not the love I have for an individual, but the love I have for humanity. Part of the reason I feel so anguished about where we are today is because I really, really love the world. I love us. I love the possibility of being human. We are so capable of great things, and we are so capable of terrible things. So what feels overwhelming to me right now is this question of, where do I put my body? Where do I put my energy? Is it with a friend whose depression threatens to swallow him? Is it with immigrants at the Dilley Detention Center or in a protest downtown? Is it saving African elephants from poachers? All of these are worthy of my love. There are so many atrocities happening. We look to Houston this week. A Houstonian was killed by ICE on his way to work. In the broader world, an Egyptian relief worker was killed by Israeli forces the day he set up a large screen for Palestinian children to watch the World Cup. We have a president who calls for violence against political opponents. And we live in a state where neither women nor trans folks get to make choices about their bodies. We need healing. And in this Jesus story, part of the healing comes from dismantling abusive power. And as I've said, there's a danger in doing so. Just by saying what I just said, I could be labeled unpatriotic, anti-Semitic, un-American, or a man-hater for criticizing injustices. I recall our guest speaker, Alex McDonald, from a couple of weeks ago, when he said, "I'm neither anti-Semitic nor anti-Muslim. I am for equality." When power instills fear in the population, it's no longer oriented in justice or love. Abusive power falsely equivocates the actions of the oppressed with the severity of the reaction. So they might say Lorenzo Salgado Araujo was an illegal alien and he deserved to be shot. He fled from police. Does someone who flees out of fear deserve to die? Turns out they were after the wrong guy, but in liberatory stance, we have to back way up and question the whole system that uses words like target and pursuit and criminal to talk about human beings. Just last month, a Texas judge handed 8 ICE protesters anywhere from 30 to 100 years in prison based on a presidential declaration calling them domestic terrorists. So now people who protest are called domestic terrorists and can be prosecuted as such. That's what abusive power does. I can't make sense of how this justifies such a swift silencing of opposition. It's the equivalent, as the passage says, of Satan casting out Satan. Power without love lacks the ego strength for critique and open debate, and it's quick to blame the oppressed for their situation. The healer, however, holds nuance and discredits false equivalence and eye for an eye injustice. From a liberatory perspective, the healer takes action and gets near suffering, goes towards suffering. He might stretch one hand toward the aggrieved and say, "This should never have happened. How can I help? And what do you need?" And the other hand to those in power to say, "This should never have happened. Do better. I'm here to help." This hand that goes toward power is not one of acceptance or tolerance of intolerance. It's accountability, truth, and genuine repair. The healer stands in that tension. This is called wisdom. If we do not, in some small way, challenge abusive power, then we have to accept that we are complicit with it. And if we do not, in some small way, tend to the suffering, whether it's a best friend, with protesters, with immigrants, with elephants, then we are also complicit with it.
So several people have asked me to elaborate on what I mean by describing myself as, and the teaching I do by using the phrase trans-religious spiritual teaching. And I thought using this text gave an opportunity to do that. And so I can't do this in a few words, but I'll give you a broad outline of why would I do this. Well, for one reason, it gets attention. I learned a long time ago, I don't want to put any label on myself that causes somebody to immediately say, I know what that means, and closes the door. So I want to, as much as I hate attracting attention to myself, my wife is doubled up in laughter in case you can't see that. I want to say things that cause people to say, oh, really, tell me more. This is my Baptist evangelistic side. It's being truly evangelical. Not the only reason, but one of the reasons that I wear prayer beads is to get people to say, why do you do that? And then we can talk about that. So let's start with the fact that most people who espouse or reject either one, a religion, do so based on the luck of their geographical location and their family of origin. Let's just start there. I grew up in a Baptist church attending family. I had no choice about that. So when I grew up, I went through a period of rejecting that and then came back to it. Some people never leave home. And that's neither good nor bad. It can be either. The way some folks leave home keeps them attached to it. Understand what I mean? I have met many, many, many men who had a bad relationship with their father, and they said, I'm never going to be anything like my dad, which puts dad in their head all the time. It's like, try not to think of a blue butterfly. It's there. Oh, I hate the Catholic Church because, and that's there. So that's rejected. We have some of them, some of you know these people. Dear people who just moved to another city. And we've been in touch with them, and they told us about the church that they have decided to attend. You know what their criterion was? The music program. Not the beliefs, not the doctrine, not the denomination, but do they have good music? There are a multitude of criterion that people use to either go to or stay away from a religion. So we start there. That it doesn't have anything to do with a religious upbringing. So, trans-religious spirituality seeks for an engagement with a religious path that results from a combination of a genuine religious encounter and an authentic personal choice. Now, I had a teacher at Harvard who said, it's better to dig one well 60 feet deep than 10 wells 6 feet deep. So I chose to stay within the Christian tradition and to dig one as deep as I possibly can.
Wait, the last part of that teaching is my favorite, because when you dig one well 60 feet deep, that's where all the waters run together.
Yeah. So, to be more precise, I am a trans-religious spiritual teacher in the Christian tradition, or in the Jesus tradition, I prefer to say. Now, my experience is that this tradition leads to experiences of wholeness for which I'm seeking. And at the same time, I recognize the insights and benefit from other practices and traditions. I have, for the last several months, been reading the works of Kabir Helminski. He's still alive. He's a little younger than I am, lives up in the Washington, D.C. area. He is a renowned Sufi scholar in the Islamic tradition. And I've been reading his works. And they have enriched my understanding of the teachings of Jesus. Transreligious spirituality also supports and encourages, indeed it requires, an all-inclusive community that embraces all people, regardless of race, age, sexual orientation or practice, gender identity or expression, class or ability. If your religion doesn't do that, I don't want anything to do with it. The Protestant religion that started, well, the Roman Catholics did this, but then the Protestants we perfected it. We took what's called the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist or communion, and made it an exclusionary thing. Whereas the one thing that we know is that Jesus welcomed everybody to his table. Transreligious spirituality is committed to justice because behaving with compassion is the fullest expression of a wise and useful religious belief. Transreligious spirituality seeks to embrace a vision of the earth, as we witnessed recently in the Artemis II mission. Indeed, every astronaut who's gone up and looked back at Earth has had a spiritual experience of seeing the Earth as a fragile ball floating in space. No boundaries. It's where we all have to make it or not. Nobody's going to be surprised at this, are they? Transreligious spirituality is committed to a daily spiritual practice. If you don't like that phrase, transreligious spirituality is committed to a lifelong practice of learning more and more and more. The wealth of what we can know expands as we know. We can elaborate. But transreligious spirituality knows that questioning is more valuable than absolutes of dogma. And perhaps the most defining phrase is that it's opened and not closed. Transreligious spirituality values curiosity over certainty. By the way, there is an etymological connection between certainty and sincere. You always hear, you would not always, but you sometimes hear people say, oh, he's such a sincere believer, or I'm so certain of my beliefs. Etymologically, the word certain comes from a word that means sort out, sifting. Okay? And the word sincere literally means without wax. And it comes from a time when busts of people would be made, and if the sculptor did not have enough of the material to make a solid bust, they would fill the inside with wax. So a statue that was without wax, sin, S-I-N, without sincere, wax, was said to be sincere. So if you are a certain sincere believer, there's a chance you're a blockhead.
So I guess the cure to becoming a blockhead is curiosity, which the best place to start with curiosity is with ourselves. The equivalent message to the Mark passage that we read earlier in the Gospel of Thomas is, "It is not possible for anyone to enter the house of a strong man and take it by force unless he binds his hands. Then he will be able to plunder the house." So this is a call to action, to question abuse of power, but it's also a call for internal change. So we're embracing nuance here. We're not being literal. We're not going to plunder the strong man's house for real. We are looking inward, which is what metaphor asks of us. And rather than advocating eye for an eye justice here, He's saying that we have to dismantle the ego, or the power that the ego has over us. Similar to waking up to confront fear in lethargy, we have a continual internal struggle between the ego and the self. One of my favorite stories that illustrates this tension is said to come from a Cherokee parable about the two wolves. It tells of a battle raging inside of all of us. One wolf is evil, that symbolizes anger, greed, ego, power. The other is good, that longs for peace, love, and kindness. And when the child asks which wolf wins the fight, the elder replies, the one you feed. We make a choice. Every day, every moment, we choose which wolf to feed. You will not hear me say in this class to make the case that we should kill the ego. I really resent pop psychology for that. Death to the ego. If you kill your ego, you won't make it home. You will forget to stop at a stop sign. You won't follow directions. You won't know what's on your grocery list. It's our executive assistant. Keyword being assistant. It's necessary to our survival, but the question to ask ourselves is, how much control does it have? Binding the strong man, in this case the ego, and plundering the house speaks directly to that need for psychic integration, to let the self become larger than the ego. We cannot defeat Satan with Satan, or ego with ego. To become aware of the negative forces of the psyche, like fear and lethargy, or defensiveness and anger, our house needs to undergo a massive restructuring. In this, I don't know how many of you track your dreams, but I have a lot of dreams about houses, which is like my psyche's constantly under construction. It's always changing, it's being added on to, sometimes it's fragile, sometimes it's sturdy. So I find those dreams to be really telling. Where am I in this process? And so in this space, we're not only asking what are my needs and how do I get my needs met, but what are the needs of the collective? And how am I getting those met? A relevant spirituality, also based on liberation, stands in that tension between the inner and outer worlds. It's able to take on the strong man, both the seen, the outer strong man, and the inner. So how are we showing up with curiosity and wonder? How are we using our capacity to heal in a time of division? I'll end with this quote from Marianne Williamson that I'm sure many of you have heard from her Course in Miracles, which holds that each one of us is capable of performing them. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And as we let our own inner light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
So as we were trying to deal with this text this week, we kept saying, how are we going to do this? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was questions that came up, and we raised some of those questions today. And I think they're important for us to continue thinking about. What is a spirituality that is adequate for this time? I didn't say religion, because they're different. But what is a spirituality is really adequate for us right now? And by what criteria will we be able to make the wisest and the most useful choices? Again, I didn't say the right choices versus the bad choices, but the wisest choices, the most useful choices. Because the real essential needs, our spiritual needs, they have not changed much since this text was composed or since this incident happened. We still struggle over the same issues. The wayless way, which is a phrase that I took from Meister Eckhart, is an organizing pattern. It's not static. It's not fixed. It's living. It's dynamic. Dogma is firm. Rigid opinion and negative judgment darken our souls. So we got to be careful when we say, I know such and such to be true, or you're so wrong. It saddens me to see the great faith of and in love that Jesus taught and walked is in front of our very eyes, morphing into a vehicle for spreading hate and division. It's happening around us. It's being enacted into laws in this country, in this state. Jesus might say, in light of the text we've used today, that this movement in itself is of the devil, because the word devil means to divide, to scatter, to split. So what we have tried to say in this time today is that it's time for the age of certainty to be ushered out and the age of curiosity to be ushered in. I think we'll leave it at that. So no matter where you go this week, no matter what happens, remember this, you carry precious cargo. So watch your step, and we'll see you here next week.